Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative, for being here. And I'm very sorry I missed your opening testimony, and I was just trying to read through it very quickly. I did see your press conference that happened maybe a week or 10 days ago when you first proposed this bill. And I was taken aback by it, just because it seems like an excessive amount of tax. I'm curious just where you came up with the number 25%, first off.
30.
Oh, I'm sorry, 35%.
So I had mentioned, I'll just talk as though, yeah. So I came up with the number because, as mentioned previously, I had last year proposed a bill at 50%. Based on the work being done in the city of Oakland, which is roughly the size of Connecticut's 4 largest cities, they spend $27 million annually to address urban gun violence. And so at 35%, based on the information I've received from the Office of Fiscal Analysis, this tax would generate $7 million to be invested in evidence-based programs for those 4 cities.
So I guess that makes me wonder why you used 50% last year and 35% this year. Did you not have that information last time?
So in a year's time, I've done a lot more research, and I've had a lot of conversations, and I am open to having a conversation on what the amount of tax is that folks are comfortable with. As I've mentioned, the cost of gun violence in this state is so significant that we can't afford to not invest in prevention programs. And so any amount of money we can generate to go towards those purposes would save all of us in the long term.
You probably cited something in your testimony, but what are you identifying as the cost of gun violence?
Sure. So in the fall, and so to your point of there is a lot more information coming out, this is an ongoing discussion. In the fall of 2019, the U.S. Congress came out with a report that illustrates that annually in the state of Connecticut, gun violence costs us $1.2 billion. That accounts for healthcare costs, criminal justice costs, lost wages, and employer costs. I was mentioning to the committee that being a member of MAPOC here at the Connecticut General Assembly, I've had conversations about how much we spend through Medicaid when someone is shot and either unfortunately dies or is shot and left with permanent disability. And so that number is shared among non-gun owners and gun owners, and that breaks down to $333 per taxpayer resident a year.
Okay. I really don't want to have an adversarial conversation with you at all, but I got to tell you, tempted to challenge you on almost every word that you just said, because I think what you're doing is actually insulting to the many people in this room, because you're comparing gun owners with people that are responsible for violence. And those are not the same thing as much as some people want to make them. So your number for gun violence is that, you said it includes people that were shot and maybe died. Is that all it includes? Or are you including people that are somehow miss work because a loved one commits suicide? I mean, what is included in this number for gun violence?
So I would direct you to the Giffords Law Center has provided testimony that dives deeper into what those numbers include. To answer your question, the healthcare costs, yes. Also, in addition, they break down the healthcare costs, and then they also speak to the trauma that families, communities experience as a result. The criminal justice costs would come into play
Right.
if someone has been arrested.
So is it your purpose to try and equate the cost associated with these crimes with the people that are lawfully purposing ammunition in this state? I mean, I'm trying to find the connection. Why tax people for purchasing ammunition? I don't understand why that is. They have virtually nothing to do with the gun violence number that you're talking about.
So the majority of gun violence is committed with guns that were once legally purchased. And so to own a gun, there is an inherent risk. And so currently, we are all bearing the cost of gun violence in this state, both law-abiding gun owners and law-abiding non-gun owners. And so my intention is to have gun owners pay a little bit more so that we can then invest in programs that can prevent gun violence, thereby saving all of us money.
I appreciate your comments, Representative, but again, I think that that is a complete stretch. The fact that we live in a lawful society and have relatively low crime rates across this state is in fact because of law-abiding gun owners and many lawfully purchased firearms, including the ones owned by the police. I don't understand why there is a connection between criminal activity and the lawful purchase of ammunition. The vast majority of people that are purchasing ammunition are doing it because they are involved in the shooting sports or they're simply trying to increase their proficiency. I mean, do you think a guy that is about to go rob a liquor store or commit an act is someone who goes to the range regularly to practice? Is that something that you believe is happening?
Again,
Is it supposed to be a deterrent? That's my question. Is it
No.
a deterrent to anyone?
as I mentioned earlier, no, the purpose of the excise tax is not to be a deterrent for folks to both purchase ammunition or use ammunition. It is intended to generate revenue, which can then go to programs, including evidence-based programs, but we've had some dialogue here that we might potentially fund increased security at places of worship, or there was a point mentioned about the high rates of suicide with the use of a gun. So the intent of the proposal is to generate that revenue that could help offset the costs and reduce gun violence.
So it's your belief that every lawfully obtained gun is potentially going to be used in a crime, and therefore it presents an inherent risk. That's the way you put it. Is that right?
It is my belief, based on research, that a large number of legally obtained guns end up being used in criminal activity.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's probably a true statement that the vast majority of firearms are lawfully purchased the very first time. I mean, I don't know that manufacturers have theft on their, on the site of their facility or something like that very often. So, of course, guns are lawfully purchased. But I mean, once they are not lawfully purchased anymore by virtue of being stolen and then trafficked, through, a network of criminals in our state, that negates the notion of whether or not they were lawfully purchased, doesn't it?
No, I would see it as there's an inherent risk in purchasing a gun legally, and so those individuals should help fund evidence-based programs to prevent gun violence, considering all of us, non-gun owners and gun owners, are currently paying that cost.
Do you acknowledge...
Senator Sampson, just quickly, I don't mean to interrupt you. As our usual practice, we've done the kind of 5-minute exchange.
Understood.
Your bell
A
is
couple more questions.
maybe one more question, and we can come back to you after we go through other members of the committee. We just,
Thank you,
you.
Mr. Chairman. I just state that guns prevent crime as often or far more often than they are participants in crime. But I really want to ask you more about that. But since I've only got one question, I guess I'm going to leave it to the question that bothers me the most, which is, please justify for me the notion of taking taxpayer money for a constitutional right for a lawfully purchased product that people use to defend themselves against criminals, and why that money should be used to give to political lobbying groups for the purpose of trying to deny those same people their rights. I want to understand that.
So included in my testimony, I cleared up that misinformation that is being discussed around the state. The
It's not
intent,
misinformation. You said it at your press conference.
no, sir. The intent of my proposal is to generate revenue that would go to evidence-based programs, and I have attached an additional document to my testimony that outlines those three strategies, and it would be the programs in the state that work using those models. And so a group like, who is here today, Moms Demand Action, would not receive funding. A group like Connecticut Against Gun Violence would not receive funding.
Did
It
you
is-
not say that at your...
I did not. They were there, but I did not say that.
I'll
It's
have to
for-
go back.
So
I've
let's
been
just-
very clear that it's for evidence.
let's try to keep on track here. You can watch the press conference if you'd like and find out whether she said that or not.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, thank you. Are
for
there any
your
other members of the committee who would like to ask a question? Representative Grusky.